DJ Khaled.
Charlie bit me. Charlie. That really hurt. Charlie bit me. And that really hurt.
What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the Bucher Batch Boys Fantasy Baseball. Thank you, Charlie, to the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am joined, as always, by Charlie Brown. Charlie, how you doing?
Great.
And special guest Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be back, and couldn't be happier to be here with Charlie.
Yeah. This is going to be a really fun one. We're going to start tonight, guys, by going through the remaining teams we did not break down a week and a half ago who announced their keepers, because now gone. Every team's announced who they're keeping, made their cuts. And then we're going to go through power rankings. And this is probably one of the most fun shows we do. So Kyle, Charlie, and I have each made and put some effort into a list of who we think is in the best position going into the draft. That's the way we just sort of did this, is who is in the best possible position before our auction less than a week from now. So without further ado, we're going to pull up, I believe you said Eric's team is the first thing we have to go over that we have not already covered, his breakdown of what he kept and what he did not. I'm going to share my screen in one sec. And then, whoops. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Will do. And are you thinking we could alternate back and forth, kind of who wants to lead some commentary on it?
I think that sounds perfect. I feel like it makes the most sense to have. There we go, sorry. Got a little spiral thing. Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Rock and roll. All right. I was going to say, I think it makes the most sense since Charlie and Eric have a pretty close relationship. Charlie, why don't you start with this one as our guest on what your thoughts are around the hitters he kept, and then I'll scroll down and show you the pitchers.
So obviously the hitters he kept, Seegers is terrific. Volpe is terrific. Ruiz obviously is a monster with stolen bases. I think Gavin Lutz, maybe he'll bust through this year, maybe not. Who knows? He's got a couple of nice farm players on his roster in Brooks Lee and James Wood, and Ketel Marte is another strong player, but he's got a lot of spots to fill on offense, and that will be challenging.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. Scrolling down real quick to show you guys the money he's got. He's got $189 being used on all these guys, and then he has a lot of pitchers too. Let's quickly.
He has $145 left.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to have a strong draft on the hitting side. I think his pitching staff is decent, solid. Lopez for sure. Tariq Skubal could be a monster this year.
Yamamoto too, man. And I definitely feel bad seeing Senga and Bueller, both of those little red injury things next to him. Kyle, why don't you tell us sort of what you think of this pitching staff? The keeps he made here.
I actually think his pitching staff is excellent. He doesn't have a starting pitcher who's, over $20. Obviously, Josh Hader's down there, but I think we actually may see some closers go for a decent, dollar mark. So I don't think there's any huge issue there. But yeah, I agree with Charlie. I think Eric has granted himself the ability to focus on hitters in the draft. And he's got the money to do it. So I think he's in a really good position.
Perfect. And that's right at 90 seconds. So the last question I'll ask before we move off of Eric's team, just to make this kind of a speedy round, is there anybody on here you guys would not have kept?
There may have been a pitcher or two, but
I would say that Gray is potentially one that I might not have kept.
I agree with you, Charlie. And I think Eric's a pretty big Twins fan, and I think he's just pretty high on Chris Paddock.
Well, he's the one from the Washington.
Well, Chris Paddock is on the Twins. So
I got you. You're talking about Paddock, yeah, and Lopez,
yeah.
right?
Yes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the two that stick out to me are Gray and Paddock.
Oh,
so
I got you.
I'm agreeing with you, Charlie. Like, I'd say pick one of them, and since he's a Twins fan, maybe cut Gray, to your point.
I think that's a great take you both just made there. I would say the same thing. Probably, I think I said this about someone last time, but between Brooks Lee and James Wood, both awesome prospects. James Wood at one point last year. Brooks Lee's got a lot of hype. I may have picked one, but at the end of the day, don't really fault Eric too much here. He's got a lot of money to spend still.
Yep,
So
that's a good point.
overall, no real hard points to make against you, Eric. Good job. Kyle, who do I have next?
Next off, we're gonna look at Dom.
All right. Dom, the godfather of the podcast.
Is that the team under renovation?
You
Yep.
know it, Charlie. All right, Kyle. As the resident Dom guy, what do you think of these bats he kept?
So yeah, not too much to talk about on the bat side. Really, I think more on Dom. Sorry, man, but I do want to bring up a couple that you did drop. So I'm sure we'll get to that. But like, I love Aaron Savale. I think even for $6, good keeper. I know Kevin Gossman is going to have a good year, but personally, I'm trying to go with a lot of the cheap pitchers. So maybe good trade bait, or maybe you want to keep them. I don't know, but that's a tough one. I don't
Okay.
really have much to say on the others.
Charlie, what about you? Any strong opinions about the hitters you chose to keep or these pitchers you chose to keep? I
Well,
can't quite fit all of it in one screen, but here you go if you want to look at it too.
I think, what stands out for me is that he needs to draft like 16 players. And he does have a decent amount of money left. He averages $10 a player. He's got a lot of spots to fill in what will be a very inflated draft in terms of pricing. And so it'll be interesting to see how all this works out. But light on the hitting side, obviously kept some solid players in Roberts, Kim, Adley, Rutschman, and Albies, as well as TJ. So he's got a good core, but he's got a lot of spots to fill.
Yeah, I agree mostly with you both. I think he kept all the hitters that are definitely worth keeping. He's got good hitter core here. I think they're all at surplus value. Some of them by a lot of surplus value. With the pitching side, I think we probably have a little bit of a similar take, Kyle, on some guys who may have added to keep that he did not end up keeping. But I will disagree with you actually and say that I think Gossman, even at 47, is not massively, but I think still more than 5 or 10% surplus value. I think it's still worth keeping. So I defend you there, Dom.
I would have
Oh.
kept Gosman.
Yeah,
Yeah, Kyle, get wrecked.
yeah. I just like trading those guys away. That's my point.
I get it. No, I get it. And I think your point's right, that even if he is surplus value, it just means you can trade him still. But quickly before we move off of Dom, though, I think, Kyle, why don't you, because I think you were the one who said it first to me, and I agree with you to a T, probably the main guy I would have wanted to keep from Dom's team that he did not end up keeping.
Yeah, the only real criticism, Dom, that I would have for your keeper selections, I definitely would have kept Pepio. And then I think the big one is Dylan Cease. I think
Yeah.
Dylan Cease is really good, man. So I think that's tough to let him go. But hey, I mean, they're pitchers, so who the heck knows what will happen this year? Maybe Dom made the right decision. Maybe Dom's going to be laughing at the bank. But I like Dylan Cease. I was a little bit sad when I saw Raymond pick him up because I wanted him. But
Yeah, I think he would have been a keeper too. That's what I agree with.
yeah,
Good take by you both there, because I do too. I think Cease is worth holding. I think he's very justifiable where he is right now, and I think there's no way he's never missed a game with injury. Even when he's bad, his ERA is in the mid fours, and I think he's probably gonna get traded to a good team. And the
Plus,
next,
I think he was only like $16 or something.
nope, I think we all agree there. So Dom, that's our one sort of team critique. I agree also. I think a little bit less strongly, but I do agree that I would have probably kept Pepio too. But you chose not to. We'll see if it works out for you. Who was after Dom, Kyle?
Miz.
And thank you again for helping me out with that. Is it
Yeah.
Miz?
yeah. Thank you, Charlie. You're right.
Okay, I appreciate you guys. Just I'm sharing. I can't see the list too. Miz, here we go. All
I
right,
love
since
Miz's team.
you're both Yankee fans here, Charlie, tell me about what you think of Miz's keepers. Let's start. He has like a whole team of offense. Look at this entire roster's already kept. Any of them good keeps, bad keeps? Anything noteworthy you're in your mind, Charlie? We don't have to talk about all of them, but just general
Well,
thoughts.
I think obviously, you got to love Turner, Bichette, Simeon, Diaz at catcher. I'm not sure I would have kept Snyder. I think that he's got 14, like his hitting is completely established at this point. I mean, he has to, I guess, draft one middle infielder. But the average ranking of these players, when you look at the average, is on the high side. Like when you look at Arise, I think he does great for batting average and all, but I don't think he's all that great in some of the other categories. I don't know if I would have kept him.
That's a good take, Charlie. Me and Kyle talked about that a little bit on a previous pod. Arise is interesting just because almost like the way Esteury Ruiz hurts you in a lot of categories, but just crushes it and steals for you. Arise, besides being awesome in batting average, gives you a good OPS, but then for a guy who was on base like 40% of the time at the top of the lineup, only scoring 76 runs, that's bizarrely low. And then he's terrible at homers, runs, or pardon me, homers, steals, and RBI.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, do you have anything different from what Charlie said or anything that you think's worth adding?
No,
I'll pull
break
down the pictures in
down.
a sec too.
Yeah, I'll break down Miz's team more when we go through power rankings, but
Yep.
I think I agree to pretty
And
much
I
to a
think
T.
he's in a little bit of trouble with Means on the pitching side.
Yeah, being brought along slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously, we all know, hate Blake Snell. Kyle, I know you love Blake Snell, just from last year. But hopefully for his sake, Snell signs somewhere soon, just so you don't potentially miss a start or two at the start of the year here.
Yeah, it would be nice if he could put Snell in like the minor league spot or the injury spot.
I'm not sure what the blue flag is. No, it just means free agent. Okay.
That's
I guess
what
that makes
mean.
sense.
It's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
all right, F me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree with you too, Charlie, by the way, that I think probably a lot of these guys are right around cost. I think Schneider is the most obvious one, probably the hitters I wouldn't have kept, especially because you kept Tyro Estrada too. You have a lot of second baseman, shortstops.
I might have kept Estrada and got rid of Snyder.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think I would have wanted to keep Estrada, cut Schneider, and then I also may have been okay cutting. There's no one else I feel strongly about. I think Schneider's the only one I feel more than like
Reynolds,
5%.
Reynolds is a little on the high side cost wise.
Yeah, I think it's defensible just because I don't know how many guys better than Reynolds will be out there in the auction.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yep.
All right, let's hit whoever's next. Good job generally, Miz.
Sparky, Miz.
Yep. Yeah. Sparky's next.
All these
Perfect.
marks.
Yeah, the Mark squad.
All right, Kyle, you love this mark more than Issigman, you said. What do you think of his hitters you kept?
Yeah, I like both of the Mark teams. I think Mark Loki did a great job at the end of last season picking up guys from the waiver wire who were solid keep values. CJ Abrams is one of them. Yeah, I actually like a lot of the hitters here, so nothing crazy. I think Eloy may be the only one, $26. He's been red hot so far in training camp, but like whatever. Like maybe he'll work out, maybe he won't. I think the pitchers are great. I think the fact that he has all these pitchers for under $20, pretty cool.
I think Mark is definitely preparing for the saves to count more than holds next year here with Holmes, Munoz, and Williams.
Yeah, so given the current, point system where you get a point for a hold this year, that's a lot of money to invest in your bullpen.
Agreed. I think he's got to be targeting that, I imagine. I think I like those top 3 starters you got there. None of them are amazing. We'll talk about it in the power rankings or where we think your pitching staff is overall, but I think overall the only keeper I would have probably only kept one of the Holmes Munoz guys, Mark, but it's up to you. And then I agree with Kyle where I think Eloy is really the only player on this team I'm definitely not keeping. Just I think he could have gotten him back cheaper. I think he's a fun guy to have this year, probably.
Yep.
As long as he stays healthy, but I think you probably shouldn't have kept him. Other than that, though, I think he made great keeps, and I agree with Kyle. Looking back at August's transactions last year, which I did for the power rankings thing to see when guys got picked up, Mark did a really good job down the stretch. Good job, Mark. All right, who's next?
Next up is Jack.
Ooh.
Staying the man. So we're just going through Mark minutes.
Yeah. The 3 Mark guys. All right. You're a big Stan guy, right, Charlie? What do you think of these hitters you kept?
So he kept 9 hitters. The average rank on these guys is at 92 when you take the top and the bottom guys. And
anybody egregious one way or another in your mind?
Anybody egregious? Not really. I mean, it's a good core right now that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, Dominguez is an interesting person. It's hard to say whether he'll be on the roster or not.
Yeah, I almost wonder if he probably is to start the year, but I think we talked about it a little bit pre-show. Some of the guys who are, even if they don't make the big league team, right on the periphery, he's probably one of those, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, nothing crazy to talk about. I think Jack is at a different point in kind of his player development, team development, whatever. But
I mean, I think the thing that is great for him is he's got a lot of money available, $171. So
Very
hopefully
true.
he can get some value in the draft.
Very
I-
true.
yeah, I have a decent more to say about his team later, but nothing blaring from a keeper perspective.
We'll be back on you soon when we get to the power ranks, Jack. But good job overall. I don't really have any strong criticism for you either. I think you made reasonable keeps all around. The only one I probably wouldn't have kept more than like 5% lean is Marcus Stroman, but maybe you think he's gonna have a huge year.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then I think
Up-
there's only one or two left, right?
Up next is Roman, and then we have Ray, but maybe we just talk about Ray for power ranks. I think that makes more sense.
Yeah, Raymond doesn't need time here. All right. So Roman's got a lot of his offense kept here too. Is there any decisions here, Kyle, you think are especially egregious or noteworthy or interesting, worth spending 30 seconds on?
I mean, I think the only one that stands out to me, well, I guess I'll throw two out there. Pete Crow Armstrong, but good because he's a Cubs fan. I think it is fun to have guys on the teams that you root for, and he is a good prospect, so nothing wrong with it. And then the only other one, Henry Davis, I think he is trying to go in there to get a catcher, which is kind of interesting because you're also keeping Bo
Naylor, yeah.
So that's really my only criticism because you're keeping both. Do you want two catchers?
Great take. I agree with you. I wouldn't have kept both probably. I think they're both equally justifiable if it's one of your guys, but I think I probably would have tried to get one back in the auction.
Yep.
And Ty Black, I know he's got a lot of prospect hype. If he makes the team, great. I know you're targeting a lot of young guys here, similarly to Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm not saying I would have not kept him. I just think he was one that I was a little bit surprised you kept. I don't know. Not in a way that I wouldn't have done it, by the way. I'm just saying it was one I didn't expect him to. His pitching staff is all filled out too, Charlie. What do you think about these guys?
I wonder if you drop McClanahan, whether you could have gotten him back for a cheaper price in the draft. I mean, a lot of these guys that are injured usually wait till the end, and you can get them for. I got Justin Verlander 1 year for like $3, and you can get like a Robbie Ray for like nothing. So some of those guys, it's a gamble to put them back out there. Try and get him at a cheaper price.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I absolutely had marked too. I was shocked he kept him just because McClanahan's probably not going to pitch at all next year, at least in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you're probably just saying, hey, he'll be 21 the year after that, and he'll probably be back to start that season with limited innings restrictions, or hopefully not a huge innings restriction, and you have a stud because he was a top 5, 6. I had traded for him last year, and then I'm the one who cut him. It definitely hurt to do just because you knew he's got a lot of value when he comes back. So assuming he comes back, interesting take there for keeping him, but that is definitely one where I agree with Charlie that I think he probably would have gone for a little bit less than 16 in the auction. Do you disagree, Kyle? What do you think?
I think Walker Buehler went for $12 or $15, somewhere in there. So I don't think it's quite as blaring, but yeah, definitely fair criticism. I think the only thing I'll say is he has a lot of pitchers, and I think they're all pretty good. So maybe he'll trade some of them. I don't know.
You might be right. All right. So we've got 5 minutes left. Why don't we do a quick glance? Just I feel like before we start power rankings and then immediately jump out of it when we send a new zoom in out. Why don't we spend just 20 seconds on Raymond then? Unless you hate the idea.
We can. I'll definitely talk about his guys when we go through the power rankings, but Ray has Dylan Cease and Pepio and Dylan Cruz, and that's a good core right there. So
yeah,
and
there
Kobe
are no
Mayo.
Hoppy and Mayo.
Yeah, Mayo's good. I mean, he's had a great camp.
I think it's tough. I think it's tough to go into the draft. I'm not sure Kobe Mayo breaks camp with the big league club. Dylan Cruz, who knows? Same thing. But assuming they start off in the minors, it's tough to draft 13 more players.
Yeah.
to fill out your offense.
Yeah, 100%. I think Kyle's right that we can talk more in depth because Raymond's a unique situation. We haven't had anybody ever join as an expansion team before. But we can sort of talk about strategy, what you might have done, what we might have done a little bit differently, what we think you did well conceptually there.
Well,
All
I
right.
think personally, I thought that the rules around his re-entering the league were harsh. I thought that last year I proposed having each team identify a bunch of keepers and letting him take one player off of each team, so he had some kind of core. But this is pretty hard to build off of.
Would you have kept Paul Goldschmidt for 40?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about the players we
$47?
didn't keep, Charlie, besides Cease? Is there anybody from the other teams? Because me and Kyle did look a little bit at some of the guys he could have kept who he opted not to.
I don't remember that group, so I don't have anything to say.
It's just everybody's of the other 14 teams or 13 teams, pardon me. Anybody we chose not to keep, he had access to.
Oh, I see.
So that's how he got like Hoppy. That's how he got Cease and Pepio. That's how he got Mayo too, actually, and Cruz.
I might have grabbed one of those elite starting pitchers.
Yeah, I think there's a case for it. You could have given yourself. I think Kyle said Goldschmidt's one where I think he's probably at cost or a little bit above cost. But when you have nothing else, especially around it, I think you could have definitely justified it. There's some other guys too we can talk about more. But in general, Charlie, I think you're making a fair point. I think this is the most challenging possible scenario to re-enter in. So Raymond has won this league multiple times before he left and is now rejoining.
He's very confident he can build a top 5 team.
I was just going to say, it's going to give him a lot of ammo to laugh at us if he somehow ends up winning this league in the next year or two here. Do we want to start anything with power rankings? Should we just close this out and start a new one? We have 3 minutes left, guys.
I say we take a little break. We'll send out a new Zoom and start hot on the power rankings. That's my
All right,
vote.
perfect. So when we come back from break, Charlie's going to start with his number 1 team, and me and Kyle will give feedback, which is good on the list.
So are we leaving this screen?
Yeah, this Zoom ends for me. I only have free Zoom, Charlie, in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Kyle's going to send a link out, though, for another one.
Okay. Can you email it to me?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. See you guys on the other side.
We'll be right back.
Miller time. Champagne beers.
Okay. All right, guys, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the break. And I hope now everybody's excited for, again, I think this is probably my favorite show we did all last year. At least one of them. We're going to rank everybody's teams. So we've talked about all the keepers. We've talked about the trades. Without further ado, Charlie, as the father, the patriarch of our league, why don't you give us your number 1 team heading into the draft?
Well, it's hard not to pick Nick's team, the Bucher team. The keepers are amazing on the hitting and pitching side. Ranked number 1 in terms of the average rank of the 9 hitters and the 4 pitchers. To go with Strider and your other guy. Who's your
Cole.
other? Oh, Garrett
Cole.
Cole, yeah. So the thing that I always find amazing is you have $2 to spend for 13 players. You have $28 left. And I can never figure out how you get quality into those 13 spots. But I think you wind up making about 15 trades and you build your roster up to the maximum salary value and you pull it off. But it's hard not to go with the defending champion at number 1.
Kyle, was I your 1?
Yes. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah.
I was
And
my own too. So you go ahead, I guess, first. I'll talk.
And we'll move through this. I don't really have anything, much else to say, or else I'll get criticized for just, kissing up to Nick. That's not going to be the whole show today. But
Well,
I
almost ranked Nick too, but I gave
Okay.
him the benefit of the doubt for being defending champion.
We may be on the same wave here, Charlie. So just as a quick call out, I did name this tier. There's only 2 teams in this tier, and I named the tier the Genetic Freaks.
Ah, okay.
So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I agree with most of what you said, Charlie. I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot generally. This is the hardest I've ever gone with limited money and limited spots into an auction the last few years. I've always kept a lot of guys. I feel like I have a lot of strong players, but this year I really, like you said, I have like $1.50 or $2 whatever it is a player.
$2.
Yeah, it's going to be very challenging. I'm probably gonna have to watch for the first 90 minutes of the auction, which is no fun. And I'm going to probably be the guy who's consistently nominating somebody who I think is going to go for no money, and then he's going to get bid to $4. I can't buy him for like an hour straight. It's going to be miserable.
Yes.
But I do hope my sleepers are good, because if they're not, it's going to be a lot of stars and scrubs type looking roster. Hopefully, if you break out, then I can contend. I just think I have a lot of guys that are worth holding on to, and it was hard to cut guys this year for me. I was my own number 2 though, and it sounds like Kyle has a tier of me and my number 1. But Charlie, who was your 2? We'll talk about when we get to it.
So my number 2 is Griff.
He was my 1.
I came close to giving him 1, but I gave, defending champion, I gave you the benefit of the doubt. But
And I
Griff
appreciate it.
has, a similar hitting lineup to you. The average rank for you is 45. The 9 players, the average rank for him is 47, but he's keeping 11 guys. And on the pitching side, he's got 6 pitchers in the average rank. He was second in that category in terms of the average rank of his pitching staff. And, I think that, and then, so that was where I was leaning. He's got a little bit more money than you. He's got an average of $7 a player to go get, which is better than 2.
For sure.
So he was my second pick, and to a large degree, it was hard not to put Brandon's team in that 2 spot, but I think he's got a bunch of superstars that'll develop over the next couple of years, and I don't know. Like I was saying before, over the last 9 years, only 9 rookies made it into the top 50 in terms of ranking at the end of the year. So some of those guys will play a partial year, and he'll be loaded down the stretch, or in years to come with some of those guys he's gotten in Holiday and Churio and whatnot. So
I think you're probably right. We'll talk about Brendan Moore when we get down to him, it sounds like. But
yeah,
I mean, imagine if you had last year Corbin Carroll, Anthony Volpe, and Jordan Walker going into the year. And I imagine probably his guys break out in a similar way, where one of his, maybe it's Langford, maybe it's Churio, maybe it's Holiday. One of them's like a top 5 pick next year. One of them's like a top 100-ish pick the way Volpe is. And then one of them's probably like a 150 pick the way Walker is. We just don't know who's going to be who yet. Still with Griffin, though, just because Griffin's my number 1. I agree. Again, I had myself, too. I had Griffin 1. I think because Griffin has a lot more flexibility with his remaining spots, and he's got more of his roster filled out, that's why I would give him the benefit of myself. I think we both have 5 of my top 19 bats, which is crazy. We have like half of the top 20 bats between the 2 of us, but he has, I think, a little bit more surplus value across his entire roster, just in that he has. Well, it's funny, like with my starting rotation, I have 4 guys, and I have most people's 1 and 2 in Strider and Cole. I think we'll see how it works out for him, but having 6 guys who are all probably at cost, a little bit under, gives him probably a as well-rounded roster by the end, with a little bit less top-heavy risk.
If those 6 rookies hit, he could easily win the league.
Yeah, oh yeah. But back with Griffin, though, I think he is, when I ran my own loose projections on Fangraphs thing, I had him as top 3 with 1 in most offensive categories. And since I think he probably ends up building as well-rounded or more well-rounded than me, probably the final few spots on his team, I could eventually catch him if I pick up good waiver guys, but I do think he's going to have a head start on me there. We'll see who does a better job managing the wire, who's a better job making trades. I think, even though you were so kind, Charlie, to say that I trade a lot and make good moves, historically, I think Griffin's as good or better than me at that. So it's probably a pretty 50-50 fight in my mind moving forward, but I do think he has the edge in the beginning. And I think it's interesting, though, we all agreed on me, him, and him as the 1 and the 2 in some order. So Griffin, that's the kiss of death. Good luck. Why don't we move on, I guess, then, unless you guys want to say anything else about Griffin or myself, to Charlie's 3rd team?
My 3rd team was the Brown Bombers.
Okay.
I feel like I have a lot of young talent, and I have $191 to spend on 10 players. It's $19 a player. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of inflation in this draft. But if I can get some solid players to round out my team, I think that I have a solid chance to be in the top 5, and I have myself ranked at number 3.
Yeah, you have a very I don't know how much you heard of when me and Kyle talked about your keeper decisions. You have a lot of guys, like almost the opposite of like the stars and scrubs things I did, where I feel like you have a really, really compact roster full of guys who are solid contributors right now.
Yep.
Kyle, where did you land on Charlie?
Charlie, I maybe missed that. Did you say that you had yourself third or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I had you in the top of the last tier. I have a tier of 1, 2, 3, 4, and Charlie, you only used $149. So like
Yeah.
like Nick said, like very compact, but I think some questionable keepers in terms of pitching, in my opinion. But we also have different strategies. Like I'm going kind of stars and scrubs. I have no pitchers. You have lots of pitchers. So we're taking the total opposite sides. So
Well,
yeah,
I'm obviously going to use some of my draft money to go after some aces. So,
For
right.
sure.
so
Yeah.
that pitching staff gets a lot better if you throw, some of the top pitchers in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Charlie, you have a lot of range of outcomes, I think. I had you actually before the low. Your the outfield low is pronounced low, right? Is it low or low? I always mix them up.
I mix them
Yeah.
up too.
Before he got dinged up, I had you one spot higher. I have you though at 9, which may sound less fair, but I agree with Kyle where I have a tier after the top 4 teams. That is just one big tier. And I have in my notes here, I think if you end up getting, I would actually spend more on offense personally and get a couple of the stud bats. I actually love Logan Webb, and I think Eflin is like my 13th or 14th favorite starter too. I think you have a really good starting rotation already. I don't know if I would have made every single pitch and keep you kept already, but we've talked about your decision to keep the guys you kept already too. I have you as probably my 5th team if you make a bunch of offensive bat moves, or 6th team in the top half. But if you miss out on some of those guys, my advice would just be spend whatever it costs to get the guys at the top, because I feel like between your nephew and some of these other guys who have a lot of money, I think these top guys go for a lot. But I do feel like if you get a couple of these
where
stud
did you
bats,
where did you have me?
I have you at 9.
9. Okay.
And I don't know if Kyle, where'd you say you had him, Kyle?
11.
Oh, so I like you more, Charlie. I'm the Charlie guy in this league.
9 and 11. Well, apparently I've misjudged myself.
No, not at all. This is fun because we all disagree. Now, Charlie, excuse me, if you finish like in the top 4, you get to clown us. If you finish 9th, I get to clown. And Kyle kind of prices righted me here, because if you're terrible, Kyle gets to win.
I think if you're great, then you get to take a player from each of our teams.
I'll give them to Raymond. He'll need them.
I feel like I probably should have put you higher because you had me high and you said nice stuff about me. I like your team overall though, Charlie. And I do think if you get a couple bats, you finish in the money or at least close to it.
I mean, you have a lot of cash, Charlie. So like you have a wide range of outcomes depending on how this auction goes, in my opinion.
It's funny
That's
too.
right.
Kyle's like, buy pitchers. I'm like, buy bats. So no matter what you do, one of us will like you in the post draft review too. Who was your 4th team, Charlie?
So my 4th team was Brendan, and it was between him and me for 3rd and 4th. I think he's got a great core. He has $67 left. So it's an average of $7 a player. So that's on the low side. He's obviously, I think the reason why I put him at 4 is the 6 very young, highly ranked rookie hitters that he has. I mean, if they all hit, he'll come in first. But like I was telling you before, they tend to have up and down rookie seasons before they really get going. So he's the wild card in the top 4 for me.
I think that's a good take. I have Brennan lower than I have Brennan down at 5, which I think is the lowest I could have possibly seen myself ranking him. And I feel like I am almost deferring a little bit to seeing how well he's played the last 2 years managing his team, because at risk of being sacrilegious, I love his pitching staff. Look, Burns is an obvious top 3 or 4 pitcher. He's in a great situation. Even after that Gallen trade, though, he's got Reagans, Verlander, Hunter Green, who between Green and Rodon, I don't love them as much as some people do, but Rodon's looked good velocity wise so far in spring. So that's encouraging. Green is a lot of people's darling. A lot of people I respect. And I do think Reagans and Verlander, even if Verlander starts slow, are great. So his rotation's in an amazing spot already, and it's buoyed by a real anchor. Judge and Soto at the top of that offense, even after all the guys he traded and made way for to get the young guys he has, that's a rock solid one too, man. That's two of the top, like what, not 10 hitters. And then you throw in Nolan Jones, Contreras, Yandy, and assuming probably one or two of Langford, Holiday, Carrillo, maybe even Colt Keith end up working out and being surplus value, assuming the other two maybe don't. I think he's more likely not going to beat where I am at 5th. I feel like I'm maybe not being as favorable as I could be to him, because I think 4th is somewhere I could have put him too. But I don't know. I kind of want to see it. And all that said, I sort of think he probably is in the best spot if we were doing this for like beyond this year. Like we're looking at this as far as.
Oh, when those guys all hit, I mean, he could have a dynasty for a few
I think
years.
even if 2 hit, like if Holiday and Trio, just for example, are like 90% of Corbin Carroll, it's like, holy hell, he has probably the 2 best keepers or 2 of the top like 5 or 6 in the entire league. So in a different way than you, Charlie, where you have all that money and you have a lot of range of outcomes in my mind going into and out of the auction, depending what you do. Brendan has a lot less money and a lot more of his roster filled out, but just depending what happens with the rookies, and also not even the rookies, but like Nolan Jones, who I think he has a pretty wide error bars too going into the season. I could see him being like a 2nd-round pick next year, and I could see him probably, if the batting average drops a lot, not necessarily being the top 50 player he is right now too. So there's a lot of upside for him. There's a lot of downside. I want to make sure I say one more time too, I defer to Brendan a lot on decisions, so I expect this to probably to work out, and maybe I'm a little bit too low. I don't know. I've talked a lot. Kyle, sort of where do you have Brendan?
Yeah, I'm shocked that you stole my thunder here, Nick, because I thought that I was going to be like way out of bounds here, but I had 4 tiers and I had Brendan at the bottom of my 2nd tier at number 6 overall. And
okay, wow.
I think you guys are kind of saying the exact same thing that I'm thinking here, that Brendan may have the number 1 team that's best positioned for the future, period. But my primary barometer for making these rankings was really, what team do I want today? And I have this huge bias towards trying to compete. And I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I mean, if a couple of these guys hit, if a couple of these guys are Corbin Carroll, Brendan's going to win straight up. But this is a very competitive league this year. It was very challenging to make these power rankings. And I'm a little surprised that Nick had Brendan at 5. I thought that I was going to be thrown out of the room for number 6, but nothing crazy else, nothing unique really beyond that.
And it sounds like we're all pretty relatively in agreement on it. You said we have 4, 5, and 6. So we think you're a top half of the team, Brendan, top half of the league team probably, but again, wide error bars. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4 for you, Charlie. Who was your 5th team?
So my 5th team was Zach. It came down between Zach and Kyle, but I went with Zach. He's got a very solid hitting team. The average ranking of those players is like 71. It's 3rd best of the guys that had the keepers. He's got 4 great pitchers, there, and he's got $12 to spend on 12 players, so he's good there. It was hard to I think what really drove it for me is Kyle's got a lot of work to do on his pitching staff.
Really, you think so?
Kyle's like, I'm done with my pitching staff. But more about Zach though. I agree, Charlie. Zach is so I have Zach 6. But he's in my tier with Brendan and a bunch of the other teams too. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think he's got some amazing top end guys here. I mean, Bobby Witt is probably already right now like at worst like the 10th best, and probably higher than that like overall values as a keeper. He's incredible. He's not necessarily the consensus, but he's a consensus top 3 or 4 pick, and maybe he's a consensus 2 by the end of draft season. He's going to smash. And then Ellie and Harris are amazing compliments too. So you've got a handful of all category contributors in offense. I think you have a great baseline there. I think Zach's who I project to lead the league in steals, so he's probably going to win that category in my mind if he does anything in the auction, but he already has a great baseline of it. And then the pitching staff too, like Kirby and Peralta, I think is a fantastic 1-2. You've already got locked down. Clase is arguably the best relief option, one of the best relief options. So he's got star power already, and he's got a lot of money left, like you said too, Charlie. He can probably get one or two guys who are not just like average players. You can get like maybe one good player and two or three mediocre ones and just $1 guys, or you can do whatever he wants to do. He's got flexibility. In a way that I think is really exciting. He and Brendan between 5 and 6 is really hard for me because I actually think I like Zach's situation slightly more. They have similar builds generally. For this year, though, I am still, again, I have Brendan one spot ahead of him, and it sounds like you have Brendan slightly ahead too. But I think we probably did similar mental exercises with them because I think Zach has, look, dude, if Ellie De La Cruz is Ellie De La Cruz upside Ellie De La Cruz, Zach might win the league. And I think that's very much in the range of outcomes.
Sure.
I think that's where we differ. I like Ellie a lot this year. I have Zach at number 5 overall. Zach has only used $196, so I think he's maybe in the top 4 or 5 teams in terms of money left. And
he's got $144 left, an average of $12 a player for 12 players.
Pretty good. And we haven't talked about Michael Harris, who's just another one who checks off pretty much every box.
Don't talk to me about Michael Harris.
But truly,
you trade too much, Charlie. You should have kept him. You're always trading.
I was trying to do a Nick.
You're trying to take on these high cost guys like Mike Trout last year.
I learned my lesson.
So I toyed with having Zach at number 4 overall. So I do like his team a lot. I have him 1 over Brendan in the middle of tier 2, which I'm calling the tenders. I think we're contenders. So I think Zach has a great team. I think absolutely. If Ellie, a lot of podcasts have talked about this, but if you take a look at his projections, all of the innings are very low. So even taking it at face value, he's producing a lot. And so you bump those innings up, all of a sudden he's a league winner. So again, we're talking wide range of outcomes. I really like what you said, Nick, and I think Griffin may have said this as well, but the pairing of Kirby and Peralta, it's great because, Kirby gives you the stability. He helps you out with whip. Peralta, who knows what could happen, but I kind of like my chances if I have Peralta. So great team, Zach. Good job.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say on Zach too is I think one thing, I have him down at 6, so I have him lower than both of you by a spot, but we have him in the same tier. He's the end of my top tier too. He's right at the back half of my top tier. I only have 2 tiers. But I think, Zach, if I was giving you advice for the auction, maybe you already agree, maybe you don't agree, but let me know sort of what your thoughts are, I guess. I think the only category offensively I don't see right now is like a top 5 sort of team might be power. So I would just get one of the biggest bats out there, pay for someone with a lot of power. I think if you get a guy who hits 35, 40 home runs and you end up finishing the top half of power also, it's going to be hard to keep you out of the money and hard to keep you out of contending in the top 3 or 4. One final thing on Ellie too. I toyed with having you a little bit higher too, because Ellie, I think I said this when we were with Griff a week and a half ago. Ellie's so tantalizing. He feels sort of like Mondesi almost. I don't want to be mean to him by saying he's sort of Mondesi-ish from a few years back. I just mean in the sense that Mondesi, even though he was a bad real life player, not saying Ellie is for sure, because I don't think he is a finished product at all. Obviously, he's not. But Mondesi was not a great real life player. And as long as Mondesi played, he was incredible just because of his skill set for fantasy. Yeah. I think Ellie's the same deal. And I think part of the reason Kyle made a really good point talking about the projections on plate appearances and innings played for Ellie is something I said last time about the crowded Cincinnati situation. And I think one way it gets a little bit less crowded is they haven't brought back Joey Votto yet since then. And Jonathan India is a lot slower along than people thought 2 weeks ago. So some of the potential dominoes that could tip over Ellie if he has a bad first month are starting to fall away. I'm becoming more confident in Ellie getting some leeway if he has a bad first month. Because, look, he's so streaky. He's going to have a month probably where he's the best player in fantasy. He'll probably have a month where he's not great. And I was worried coming into the year, if he has that month early on, it could potentially limit his ability to play the next month every day. I'm not that worried about that right now. So we've talked a lot about Zach. I think Zach's in a pretty good spot. Zach's definitely my top half of teams. Charlie, he was your 5, correct?
He was my 5, yes.
Who was your 6, sir?
Kyle.
Oh, Kyle. Interesting. What do you think about Kyle?
So I think Kyle's got a solid hitting team. He's going to have to work some miracles in the pitching area with 2 guys there, and Baz being one of them. So
yeah, you don't like Baz?
What?
I'm just making a joke. You don't like Baz?
No, I mean he's fine to keep for the future, but you know, I always feel a lot better when I have keepers because it's less to think about in the draft.
Yep.
And it's less competition, and this draft's going to have a lot of inflation to it. But if you had a deeper keeper pitching staff, it would have been easier to rank you a little higher.
I hear you.
Anyway.
Well, if you go last, Kyle, because you're you. I had you 3. Maybe I'm the high guy on you, it sounds like. And the main reason being just sort of, I talked about with me and Griffin, we both had 5 of my top between 22 and 25 hitters. You've got 4 of my top 25 also. And Betts, Freeman, and Carroll are like 3 of the top 8 bats. I mean, that is probably that's higher than me or Griffin even have as far as like your top 3. You'd probably win anybody in the league right now as far as your best 3 players on offense. So I think you have a lot of star power at the top. Your offense, I'm pretty excited about. I think you're going to be probably the main team that can give me and Griffin a run in most of the offensive categories. I think we have a chance to contend for the top spots. And your rotation is just, that's where your error bars are. Obviously, Charlie said it too. If Glasgow stays healthy, if Boz breaks out, like I could see you very easily. And Mason Miller, by the way, great time talking about this. I think I sent you the tweet about it.
Yep.
They saw the pod, man. They saw me say your best case scenario is Mason Miller becomes a 2 or 3 inning relief guy and just smashes through like an 80, 90 inning season, gives you 170 strikeouts,
Give
bunch
me
of
some
holds,
volume.
bunch of wins. Yeah,
My
that's what's
volume
happening
daddy.
apparently. So
Volume Daddy Miller.
He's gonna volume daddy for you, I guess.
So here's the issue though. With $67 left in the draft, I mean it's going to be hard to get like premium pitchers. You're going to have to hit on all of these low price pitchers.
No, I agree with you, Charlie. I think it's more the reason I'm able to have Kyle as high as I have him, and we'll get to you in a sec, Kyle. You can tell us where you have you. The reason I feel confident is I am not, and I think I've said this a bunch of different times now in different ways. I am less concerned than I think the average person is about the way the pitching changes we made in the offseason. I am less concerned than I think most people are about the way that will impact the ability to stream and get passable pitching ratios anyway. I think Kyle, I feel fairly confident we'll be able to make trades and stuff to get a pitcher or two if he needs to. We'll be able to pick up a Barrios or a Snell because he's pretty practical on the wire. And I also just don't necessarily worry it's going to be that hard to still be competitive, even if you don't have a great base in pitching. We'll see. I acknowledge probably he's in a little bit of a worse spot than me or Griffin. That's why I have him 3rd. But it will be risky though. Like if Glasgow goes down, I think all bets are off. And Glassow's never played an entire season in a way that was dominant. So I don't know. We'll see. Kyle, where'd you have yourself?
I had myself 3. I had myself at the top of tier 2 under the tenders. Yeah. I mean, I think my strategy going into the auction is pretty obvious at this point. Like,
Smash pitching.
I need pitchers. I think the one reason why I was excited to try to consolidate top end talent and I had an opportunity to do so was just the fact that I really do like my outfielders. So we spent a lot of time talking about my top 3 guys. I think that's great. But I actually like, Suzuki a lot. I like Teoscar a lot. I like Soler a lot. Like those guys. And Randy Rosarena is probably a little bit above cost, but I like him too. So those are the main reasons why I
Betts
decided
too, man. What idiot gave you Betts? Crazy.
But it's the main reason I decided to go with this strategy. And you guys are right. Like a lot of great pitchers may be out of my price range, but I'm going to be a hawk on the waiver. And a lot of my top pitchers last year didn't come from the draft and didn't even come from trades. So I wouldn't say I'm banking on the same thing. And it would suck if Glasnow's hurt. But we did also increase the depth of our IL slots. So I'm willing to take on volatility. I'm long volatility.
I feel like I deferred to you a little bit watching the way you played the wire down the stretch last year, watching the way you picked up pitchers throughout the entire season. Again, like Snell, and it didn't work out with Manoah, but Manoah too. But Barrios it worked out great with.
Yeah.
The same way I defer to Brendan a little bit when we talked about Brendan's team. The way I think you manage your team makes me feel confident it could work out. And even if it doesn't, I don't think there's a scenario where you're terrible in pitching. I think you might be bad or below average in pitching if bad things happen to you, but I don't see it bottoming out.
Do you guys play the card game Hearts? The way I look at it is I'm trying to shoot the moon, right? Like it may not work out, but I'm trying to get all of my value in one spot, and we'll see what happens. And this is really the OG Griffith strategy, right? So nothing original.
Yeah, it is funny
But
talking about me and Kyle doing mostly stars and scrubs, and Griffin is the king of stars and scrubs.
yeah,
All right, though. So that's 6 is Kyle. Kyle, where'd you have yourself there? You said you had yourself 3.
3. Yep.
All right. Charlie, who was your 7th team? Who was the final half of your top half of the league?
So the bottom half was really hard for me. The team I went with at number 7 was Eric Jerry. I had him at 7. He's got, 4 really nice hitters, and he's got a solid pitching staff, and he's got, pretty good capital to spend in the draft. And if he makes some nice picks, and he's got 2 farm players that are solid. So I went with him at 7.
I like that take, Charlie. We're in lockstep, man. He was my 7th team too. And he's like the opposite of Kyle, where, look, dude, it sucks that Bueller is slow coming along and Senga is hurt now, but generally positive news on Senga in the last week that came out since the first time we heard about the injury. And even so, dude, Skubal, Yamamoto, Pablo Lopez, that's 3 of my top 12 starting pitchers. That's incredible. And then you have Hader, another one of those guys who could be the top relief pitcher type situation there. So the pitching is nasty. He is my favorite to be in the top 3 of pretty much all the pitching categories, as long as he does a good job in the auction, getting some relievers to go with him. And he's the guy I have up there with Zach as far as like speed leaders, depending who he drafts, just based on what he has right now for the 5 spots or whatever it is he has. He has a lot of money going in the auction there, so he can go a lot of different ways. But I mean, Ruiz, Volpe, chip and speed for Marte and Lux. I think it's a very good setup there. Seager gives you a baseline of a really elite offensive player too. I think you're, with some good luck, finishing in the top 5. With some bad luck, maybe on the top half of the bottom of the league, Eric. But for someone who joined last year, I love where you're set up going into the season. Kyle, where'd you have Eric?
I had Eric 9th, but I think you could argue that Eric is a top 4 pitching unit. Like it's really good. And yeah, being bitten by the injury bug is not a fun thing. But again, we have 6 injury slots. So it's like these pitchers, like who knows how many innings Yamamoto's even going to get, right? Like, so certain pitchers have little issues. They get dinged up. You can then get replacement value, and then you can throw him back in and drop someone else. So I really like the fact that he has these pitchers and that he has them so cheap. So he's got a lot of flexibility. I like what he's doing. I have in my 3rd tier, I have 4 tiers. I can't reveal the name of this tier quite yet.
Eric is the last team for me in this. Again, I like I said, I only have 2 tiers. It's just top 7, bottom 7. And Eric, you were the last team for me in the top half. So Charlie and I, as usual, agree 100% on everything. We both think you're number 7. Do you have anything else to say, Charlie, before we move off of Eric?
No.
Okay, my last point, actually, I do want to say, I had it written down, just saw it here, is I imagine just because of how good a baseline I think you have in steals, maybe, depending who you end up drafting, I consider trading Ruiz midway through the year. The same way Griffin might want to trade 1 or 2 of his mid, like SP3 types. I would look to do that if I were you, Eric. We'll see. Because I do think you're going to probably finish in the top 2 or 3 in steals just by having Ruiz. And he's a great kind of guy where you can go to the guy who's like 9th or 10th or 11th in steals and be like, hey, you want to make up some points? Here's a Seri Ruiz. Hopefully Senga comes back. Hopefully Bueller comes back. And you're in a great spot. Who was your number 8, Charlie?
My number 8 was Bread Toast Brad.
Wow.
Toasty. Kyle doesn't like that.
I think I had a hard time with the. I think a lot of these teams from here on out are very close. It was hard for me to pick, exactly where they'll finish, but I have them, obviously in the bottom half of the standings.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a problem with it. We're talking Brad. I had Brad one spot down from Eric. Brad
was your 10, you said then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think Brad has a great team, and it really sucks with Bradish. Bradish low-key, he was actually one of my favorite players going into this year. And so Charlie, like for me, that moved him a lot, actually.
Yeah, I thought about that, but he's also got decent amount of money to spend, so
Yeah,
we'll see what he does.
Brad's in that middle tier for me, and I think Brad has a good team. I mean, the fact that we're talking about a team that has Julio Rodriguez, Matt Olson, pretty good pitching, and then a healthy Bradish, that's a total Bradish move. Like that could be a contender. Um, so kind of stinky luck there. I do think that's a big one for him.
Yeah, Brad's got previous top 2 finishes before. He's definitely proven he knows how to play and manage out the season in this league. I have Brad. I guess I'm the low guy on Brad. Actually, I had him 10 before the Bradish stuff, and now I have him 11. So we've got you 8, 10, and 11, Brad. Between the three of us, I'm the low guy on you, unfortunately. But again, I think Charlie's very accurate with what you were saying to start this conversation about Brad, in that I think the bottom 7 teams are all very close, and the top 7 teams are all very close.
Yeah.
So Kyle's absolutely right. I think Brad of the bottom teams might have arguably the best 1-2 between Julio and Olson. So I love that baseline for you. I think McLean, Santander, Jimenez for speed give you a solid offensive core. And if the Bradish injury and Montgomery had signed already, again, I feel like because of the Bradish injury, I'm lower on him obviously now. Montgomery, I think when me and Kyle talked a couple weeks ago, I liked him more than you, and I still probably might, but I'm getting a little bit concerned that he hasn't signed just yet. And especially if it's with Boston, I don't love that. And that might be the favorite now. That might take him out of, I think I may have said previously, he was like an SP 2-3 line guy for me. Maybe he drops a little bit lower. I don't know. We'll see where he signs. I'm speculating when I say that now. More than anything, it's just that he hasn't signed yet, the same way I was saying that about Snell. But Brad, like you said, though, too, has $130 to spend. I love that. I'd prioritize going after someone like Luis Castillo, who I know you didn't keep, and I think it probably was the right choice. But whether it's him or someone like him, of those top aces out there, I try to get one of them probably. If no aces, though, I fear Brad may be a bottom third or quarter of the league pitching staff, unless he hits on some late gems. But power and speed feel middle of the pack, a little bit above that to me. I think depending on how Brad prioritizes the auction, he's got a pretty wide range of outcomes where he finishes either back half of the money for me. But as of now, I think he's probably in the mid of the second half of the teams.
Well, I'm excited to hear who Charlie has next, because I think Nick, we both have a number 4 missing.
Great memory, Kyle. Yeah, I was just going to say, we've been very similar on a lot of these. My number 4 is the only team we haven't covered yet.
Yeah.
Of my top 7. My top 7, and actually even my 4, and then the next highest I have is 8. So we've been very close between all of us here generally. Do we want to try to squeeze it with 2.5 minutes left, or should we go to a break and then finish up the second set of 6 teams?
I think we should do a break. What about you, Charlie? We only have 2
I don't want
minutes
to rush.
left. Yeah. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Let's go to commercial. We'll come back. I'll send a link out, and then we'll cover the final 6 teams.
Cool. All right.
See you
Talk
guys.
soon, guys. We'll be back.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
I wish I'd known him.
He was the best star pilot in the galaxy. And a cunning warrior. I understand you've become quite a good pilot yourself. And he was a good friend. Which reminds me, I have something here for you. Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough.
Cerveza Cristal. Cerveza Cristal.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the break. Let's cover right now Charlie's number. We just did what, 8?
Yeah.
Number 9
9.
team, Charlie. Who's 9th?
So my 9th team is Stan. And if Skeens throws 110 miles an hour, he might be a gem.
Very true.
I think, he's got 9 hitters and 7 pitchers, all pretty solid. And he's got $171 to spend in the draft, an average of $19 a player. So I think that he's in good shape to finish higher in the standings than he did last year.
Kyle, what do you think of Stan?
So I have Jack at 12 overall. And I think there's just one fundamental difference in, I guess, the valuation that I'm picking up on with Charlie. Because I like to look at that too, Charlie, like the average cost per player. But I guess the question that I'd like to pose is, what players are out there? Like, we can see now who is draftable, and it's not as many players, I think, as
No.
we typically see. And so there's some high end talent, but then I think the problem is you pick some middle guys. Like I don't know, maybe like Willie Adames might be a good player to pick on. I don't know what he's going to go for, but based on how much money is out there in the market right now, do you think he's going to be a good keeper year two? I just worry that maybe there are a lot of players who could get picked at like the $20 range, and then they're not going to be very enticing to keep the next year. So I think it's challenging, perhaps, if I don't know. There's this kind of idea like when everyone zigs, maybe you should zag. And I think that there's this problem where you might not be able to get the best value if you have a lot of money, because every player is going to be pretty competitive. The onus is going to be on you to get really good players at the $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 range. That way, year two, they're a good anchor for your team. But who cares if you get them at $20? Like I got Newt Bar last year for 20 some dollars. I like Newt Bar again this year. I think he's pretty fun and interesting.
Should have kept him.
But exactly, $20, keep year two. No, thank you. So like that's the problem. That's what I hit last year. So I just think it's an interesting variable with the way that our players get inflated, that there's an additional value assigned to them when they are in that $1 to $5, $6 range. If you win them that low, wow, awesome. If you win them at like the $15 range, it's like, ooh, they better be really good, you know? So just calling that out, like, because that average cost thing is super valuable. And hey, maybe Jack goes out there, gets Castillo, maybe he gets, you know, Trout, maybe he gets, you know, 2 or 3 other like big hitters. But I just think it can be tough. So I put him in my rebuilders tier. But I think still really good decisions in terms of who he did keep.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm the low guy on Jack. I had Jack 13th. I think without restating everything Kyle just said, it is an interesting disparity here, and that I think I'm also a little bit less optimistic with teams that have a lot of money going in than it sounds like maybe Charlie would be. Although we all generally have Jack in the bottom half, and I mean, obviously anybody can win the league, frankly, but I would tend to agree that, and I actually have Charlie on my notes here. He's like Charlie Light in my mind.
That's what,
in that he has a lot of, and no, I mean, joking aside, I'm not trying to be funny with that. I just mean that he has a lot of guys kept who I think are serviceable. I think Charlie has a few higher upside type players kept, but he's a lot of guys at cost or within 10, 20% of what I think their cost should be. And while there aren't a ton of like blue chip guys there, I think Casas, Arenado, Steer are all guys who are very fair where they are and good players still. I think ideally, if I'm Jack, like you said, Kyle, maybe Castillo, I would say offensively try to add a couple top 30 to 40 hitters just because you do have a lot of money. And in the rotation, I think it's very interesting sort of what he ends up deciding to do. I think Sonny Gray and Bobby Miller are an excellent 1-2. Neither one's probably going to finish as a top SP1, but I think they're both high SP2s. I think it gives you a really good foundation set up to do a few different ways, whether you want to try to get another real ace or not, whether you want to maybe wait a little bit on pitching and get some relievers, prioritize hitting. I think if you got one, I'd feel great about it. But like you said, there's not a ton of amazing players out there, Kyle. I think Jack's got a pretty high range of outcomes. So even though I have him 13th, when I was doing like realistic outcomes for like as a band for everybody in this, I still see ways Jack finishes in the back half of the money. And I'm not just saying it to be like nice to Jack, because I know I have him ranked 13th. I do think there's a lot of range for him just because he has all that money to spend. So if he gets priced out the expensive guys, I'm really pessimistic. I think if he gets maybe 1 or 2 high-end bats and then 1 ace, I feel like he's a guy who could finish in the top half still.
yeah.
And I don't want to regurgitate everything you just said, but I do think you're making a good point about as far as valuing what you have going in versus what you could get in the auction.
I like Bryce Miller a lot too. He's another good one.
I agree. A lot of upside there. Anything else for me that you guys on Stan before we move off him? All right,
Nothing else here.
let's go then. Charlie, who was your 10?
So I had Sparky at number 10.
Nice. What do you think about Mark's team?
You know, he's got a solid core of players. He's got $100 to spend to get, you know, 10 players. And you know, he's got a nice base to work off of. I think all of these teams in this level are very comparable. it's hard to
Yeah.
pick between 8 and 10 and 12 and
Yeah, I think it's a similar tier for a lot of them.
yeah.
I had Mark at number 8, so I'm a little bit higher on Mark than you are, it sounds like. Not by a ton, but just a little bit. I think Gunnar, Schwarber, Abrams, Christian Walker is an excellent core 4 there. I don't think any of them, besides maybe Gunnar and Schwarber, depending how high you are on them, are like top 15 to 20 hitters. But I think you have a lot of guys who are in the top like 50-ish, top 60, 70-ish. So I've said this about a few teams already, which is why I think it's going to be hard to do in the auction. But if you can get a top end bat or two, I love where Mark is as far as offense goes. I want to call, I think Mark did an amazing job here being aware of sort of what he's got and that he's like continuing to hold on to someone like Stephen Kwan, who's batting average and not necessarily empty batting average entirely, but that's great when you have a guy like Hoskins and a Schwarber you're keeping alongside. So I think you have a good power base with guys like that. And then Kwan helps you make sure you're not in the bottom half of batting average. I don't really think Mark has any amazing strengths or weaknesses, although I think he's above average in power is probably my main takeaway on offense. So I think he's a little bit above average in that, but middle of the pack probably in most categories, depending what he does in the auction. With pitching, I think he's like a slightly better version of his dad's team. I think Framber, Grayson, Luzardo, again, there's no SP1 there probably, depending what you think of Framber, Grayson, Luzardo. Some people might say they're back end SP1s. I don't know if I'd necessarily say any of them are top like 12 to 14, but they're probably all in the top 20. And for me, they're like, I think 15, 17, and 18 or something like that. So again, there's a good chance one finishes 10th, one finishes 19th, one finishes 22nd or something like that. And no matter what happens there, as long as they're healthy, you have a great 1, 2, 3, I think, Mark. So he's also placing the most value in my mind on relievers. We talked about that a little bit with his keeper choices. I think it's not necessarily going to be an issue this year, but I think it does sort of like Charlie said, when you're looking at what's available for this specific season, it doesn't help you a ton. But I think you have a good baseline as far as your ERA and whip and stuff. Do I think you probably could have gotten a little bit of cheaper available relievers in the auction? Yeah, probably. But if you love those guys, who am I to say you're wrong for paying $5 more than you think you are for them? So again, depending on how he spends his money, for me, I think Mark could very easily finish in the money. But I think if you get priced out of the high end guys there at offense and maybe one of the pitchers, I would really probably go offense, Mark, just because I think your top 3 pitchers are already excellent. That's where I'd place my money. It's up to you to do what you want to do, but that's sort of what I would do if I had your team. I think 1 or 2 of those top end bats and you're a money finisher team, or at least contending for it in my mind. That's a lot about you though. Kyle, sorry to dominate that last few minutes there. What do you think about Mark's team?
It's funny. I also have Mark at number 8, and not to be redundant, but I wrote down Gunner, power, and very solid pitching. So I think we're agreeing on a lot here. In a league full of Orioles fans, I think it's funny because I think Gunner might somehow be underrated. I think he's going to steal way more bases this year if he's allowed to. He has the speed to do it. I do think that Mark has the potential to be a really good team. And he does finish here in the second half of my 3rd tier called the Mark tier.
Interesting. I wonder who else is in that with him. Before we move off of Mark, though, college made me think of something. For no reason specifically, let me bring up a hypothetical trade offer to the two of you, if you guys were Mark, and let me know what your answer would be to this. Okay. So hypothetically, let's say somebody offered you $6 Royce Lewis and one of $16 Logan Gilbert and or $6 Justin Steele for Gunnar Henderson. What would you say to that?
I wouldn't do it. I might be the low man on Royce, but I like Gunnar a lot. I think he's going to be like a top 25 player.
What would you say, Charlie, to that offer? Do you think it's outlandish?
No, I don't. I mean, Royce Lewis has the potential to be a really solid player. Gilbert's a great pitcher. Who was the third one you mentioned?
It would be one of Gilbert or the $6 Justin Steele with Royce for Gunnar. Mm-hmm. Was the hypothetical offer that I just came up with on the spot right now.
Given where Gunnar is right now at his price and how he did last year, it's hard to move him.
I get it. Okay, I guess I'll unpunk you guys. That's an offer I made to Mark a few weeks ago because I really wanted to get an Oriole after I traded Mullins. And Mark also, obviously, we didn't make the trade, said he thought it was a reasonable offer, but he wanted to hold tight. And I completely get that. I think Gunnar's really exciting. So all that to say, I agree. He's probably a little bit underrated. He's super fun. Thank you, Charlie. That's why you're my favorite of my co-hosts right now. How much you like Royce Lewis. I think Royce Lewis is awesome too. Kyle, you're dead to me. But so Mark, you're 10th.
Thank goodness we have 6 IL spots now.
Don't say Royce is getting hurt. Royce is not Glass now. Glass now gets hurt. Royce is healthy. They're both made of glass, unfortunately.
Glass now,
Glass Royce.
right now.
Charlie, whenever you finish chewing what you're chewing, let me know who your 11th team is.
My 11 team is Dom.
Okay.
Really solid core of 5 hitters. Needs a little work there with the complementary players. Pitching staff is the weakest part at the moment, but he's got $162 to spend in the draft, and if he spends it wisely, I think he could finish in 11th place.
I talked a lot first call before last time. While we alternate who goes, why don't you go ahead here?
I had Dom at 13. He used up $170. He's got a lot of cash, to Charlie's point. Dropped Pepio and Cease. I think, while it's not crazy, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, I think they're both pretty good values. I think that hurts him a good bit. I think it just goes to show you how competitive this league is when this is a guy who has Adley. He's got Ozzy. He's got Luis Robert. I'll also throw in Bailey Ober for $6. I do like him as a flyer, but yeah, like this is where I have him. I have him in the quote unquote rebuilders tier, just because I think this is one where like the core that he has, I think, are good values. But what about next year and then the year after that? It's not like he has the core that he will build around necessarily. Gossman fits into that category. That was kind of my problem earlier. I think Gossman super reasonable keep, but I don't think he's a core piece, right? He's more of a 1-year swing player. So that's where I am with Dom. I think he's got a lot of great talent. So it's kind of odd to see someone with a roster like this so low, but I think that just goes to show you what type of league we're in.
That's how I felt about Jack too, and I had to put Jack 13. Unfortunately, someone's got beat about a couple teams here, so I empathize with that a lot. I have Dom 12, so we're all in the general general area here, 10, 12, and 13. Without regurgitating everything Kyle just said there, I think Dom has excellent core here in his offense. Albies, Robert, Adley, that's a couple top 30-ish bats, or a few top 30-ish bats there. I think Friedel and Kim are great keeper value guys for what they are. Then you're getting a lot of surplus there. I would have kept Gausman, so I think we already talked about that a little bit in the first clip of this. Dude, Aubert to me feels like Jeffrey Springs last year, where I know he got hurt, but like he's going to be everybody's buzz guy. I love Aubert. If Aubert hadn't gotten hurt,
I didn't realize how big he was. Like I think he's like
6'9" or something. Like yeah, he is one of the hardest to pick up for these just because he's so long.
I'm pretty sure he has like the number 2 extension behind Gilbert.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Gilbert's the one guy who's ahead of him. You're right. Extension's the exact stat I'm trying to get to there. I had Aubert last year. For anybody who doesn't remember that, I was a big Ober guy. Keep mispronouncing his name because he's released Robert and Bailey Aubert.
He's the Aubert. He's got bear paws.
He's just massive, dude.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I think Savali too. You have a true ace, like a top 6 or so guy, top 4, maybe even with Gausman, an ace, and then I think Savali and the relievers are fine too. I think you're kind of like Zach in a little bit. If you go back to what I said about Zach earlier, Dom, and that I've said about a lot of teams now, but I would go after some power bats, or pardon me, some bats in the auction, specifically power though. Just given the guys you kept, I don't know if you have any amazing power floor guys. You have not terrible power. Rivera could easily hit 40 home runs. He just doesn't always stay healthy. And as good as like a guy that is Friedel, Kim, Albies, Adley, none of them are necessarily going to hit 35 home runs probably. So I would probably prioritize power. I'm sure you probably already know that because you've looked at your own team. You know it better than I do. I think if you get some amazing power guys of the available players out there, there's plenty of reason to think you could finish the top half and press for money too. That I think Kyle's right that this is very even in this tier to me. Again, I have 2 tiers, top 7 and then bottom 7. So we'll see what Dom ends up doing. But I think right now I'm basically in lockstep with you guys that he has a good situation with a lot of money and a wide range of outcomes and what happens at the auction. So what do you think, Charlie, for number 11? Who's 11? Because right now I believe we still haven't said me or Kyle's 4. Other than that, though, we're pretty much exactly right. Like
we're up to 11.
Say again.
Okay, so we're up to 11.
Yeah.
All right, so my 11 team is Dom.
Well, we just did Dom.
Okay.
So 12, I guess.
We're up to 12 then.
Did we do 10? Who was 10? I'm sorry. Was your 10 Mark?
My 10 was Sparky.
Okay, my bad then. I was just wrong. Okay, I forgot we did 10 and 11 already then. So who's your 12 then? Pardon me.
You don't want to do Sparky again?
No, so my
Let's
12
just talk about Mark
team-
all the time.
So Raymond gave me $100 to rank him higher than 14.
Let's
Same.
go.
That's
I have
he's
Raymond
my
at
4.
12, given that he's my nephew and all. He's a talented player, and I think he'll figure out a way to.
He'll weasel himself, dude. He will.
No. There's nothing. I mean, Raymond doesn't have much on that roster, but he's got a boatload of cash, $298 of cash in the draft, so he'll be an interesting person to watch. So I have him at 12 right now, and there's not a lot of players on his team, so there's not much to talk about.
Yeah. It feels very cliche at this point because I've said it about a bunch of these different teams, but with the error bars, I mean, he's got the biggest error bars. Who knows what the hell Raymond's going to do in the auction?
Mhm.
But the same way I deferred to Kyle a little bit and definitely deferred to Brendan earlier with like the way I've seen them play previous seasons out, Raymond hasn't played the last 2 years in this league, but for that, he was top 4 almost every single year he played of the first 11, and he's won it 3 times. So like Raymond is, in my mind, someone who very quickly will be competitive. And I think it's hard to underrate what that means as far as I think how proactive he'll be, checking daily, doing the micro type things that help you build up quickly. That said, Charlie's right. He has very few guys that are worth talking a ton about on his roster right now. And I had him dead last at 14, which is crazy because I didn't think I was going to. Going into this, I expected to have Raymond higher. I do have him dead last. Again, in the tier with the bottom other 6 teams. But Raymond, obviously, baseball super well. I'd buy literally, I think the one benefit he has, though, like when you talked about Gossman, for example, a little bit earlier, Kyle, on Dom's team as trade bait maybe. Raymond is in the uniquely beneficial position just because I don't know if he thinks he's contending this year. I would literally just buy every possible elite player I could because you have by far the most money. I don't necessarily think you think you're contending this year either. So just they're all going to go for too much because of inflation, but just get as many elite players that are close to what you should be paying for them as possible for the first hour of the auction. And then see if you hit a hot start and contend for the money. And if you don't, make amazing trades, get some keepers. I would say move on pretty quickly and you're in a great spot for next year. But I think the same way I said, like you should pay a lot for power bats a second ago. For some teams, you should buy a lot of speed bats. You should buy an ace for different teams. I think if I was Raymond, I would just buy every good player and every great player I could who was not an amazingly high overpay just so you could trade them. What about you, Kyle? What do you think about Raymond?
I just texted you because I'm thinking that we have like very similar rankings.
Oh,
but
no.
I put Ray at 14 also. And Ray, like the one thing that you said that's so true, like that will be interesting this year. I think Roman is one guy who criticized me for having always trading and trying to get the best out of a 2-for-1 deal. Well, how about this? Ray is in the unique spot where he might actually want 2-for-1s.
Great
right?
take.
He might actually want 2, moderate players for selling away his 1 Castillo, right? But anyway, I think Ray has a good team. I think, Glaby Baby Torres at $30. Like maybe that's one that I would have kept if I were Ray. That would have bumped him up a little bit.
Yeah, great. I'm glad you're saying that because we did say we were going to do that, and I didn't say anything out of mine. There are a lot of guys who were chosen not to be kept by people over the last 2 weeks on cut day that Raymond, I think, could have paid up for if we want to contend. I think Raymond not doing that is probably him acknowledging, I'm not trying to contend this year, and I'm just going to do the best I can to be set up for next season. Great take.
I think $30 might be par value. So do you want to spend $30 on him? Maybe not. But he has all the money in the world. I don't know.
That's sort of what I'm saying, though. I think it's the same way like we talked about last episode, me with Bregman, where I think he's probably at about cost, you with a Rosarena, where he's kind of at cost. We're trying to contend. So those guys who are at cost will pay maybe even a little bit too much for. I think Raymond choosing not to do it with a guy like Goldschmidt, choosing not to do it with a guy like Glaber, I think he's sort of acknowledging, I just want to pick my guys in the auction probably, who I want to pay whatever I can to get.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I know he was your nephew, Charlie. That's interesting. How do you feel about Raymond overall, like as a guy? Is he a good dude?
You didn't know he's my nephew?
It's funny.
I see it a little bit now, actually. It looks a little bit like you. All right, we've got 2 teams left, and we're going to have some good discourse here because I don't know if we have the exact same one, but me and Kyle both have our 4 fourth overall team still available. So who was your 13?
My 13th team was Miz.
Okay, tell us about Miz.
Well, has a solid core of hitting, but only has um, 3 pitchers, of which John Means, I think, is one of them. So he's got a lot of he's got a lot to do on the pitching side, and one of them is a closer. So he's got to build if he hits on a lot of pitching, he'll do better. But it's hard going into the draft with one starter and one reliever, even though they're Blake Snell and Edwin Diaz. So
Yeah, good take. I went first last time, Kyle. What do you think about Miz?
I have Miz at number 7. I have him at the top of my Mark tier, which is
He's your favorite Mark.
yeah. Like I really like Mark's team a lot, actually. He has lots of top 150 talent on offense. Not much outside of like the top end of Trey Turner, Bichette, Semien, and Reynolds, but that's a pretty damn good core in my opinion. So, Snell is a big question mark. I think if Snell goes to a team like the Giants, that's a little scary. And I don't like the fact that, in accessing, volatility with pitchers, typically in our league, you have the ability to, throw someone in the IL if they get hurt, or, throw someone in the minor league spot. If you have like Manoah, he goes down, might as well cut him at that point, but you didn't know it at the time for Manoah. Right. So there are these scenarios where it doesn't actually impact you too much. You get replacement value, and who knows, maybe you pick up Justin Steele. In fact, it might actually allow you the opportunity to expose yourself to more. Like it's actually weirdly at times, I believe in that benefit that you get to take these dart throws. So yeah, he needs pitchers. That's definitely number 1. Where I was going with that is Snell kind of hurts him because Snell can't go into one of those 2 categories. Snell, you can't cut him. I think he's going to be pretty good. You just got to hope that he goes to a team like the Orioles somehow, a team that's contending, not a team like the Sox, or I don't think he's going there, but a team like the Giants. I would be pretty bearish on that. So, wide range there. I don't have much else. What do you think?
I think we mostly agree. We've talked about the previous podcast, the philosophy around sort of the hidden benefit and having the ability to be proactive in the first couple weeks on the waiver wire. So I don't want to regurgitate what you said there. I think it's a good take you just made. I don't, just to hammer, you're not sure the Giants are a good team, or why are you worried about the Giants? Actually, if it was me, I think I'd love if Blake Snell was on the Giants just because of the ballpark. Are you just thinking they're not very good, he won't get any wins, or?
Yeah, I don't think they're that good.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think they're a great team. I think they're probably around 500-ish. I think probably I would be happy if he went there just because the ballpark's so big still, and just hope he ekes out some wins. But granted, you want a good offense for him just because he's a guy who goes 5 and 5 and 2/3 and 6 and 5 and 1/3 or whatever. He doesn't necessarily go super deep into games. Anyway, enough about Snell though. I think, like you said, Treya, Semien, Bichette, he's got 3 top 35 bats. So this is the lowest to have somebody who has an offensive core like that. I have Miz at 10. So I'm in between you guys on that. But anyway, I think he's an amazing offensive foundation there. Reynolds, Mullins, Estrada, Chas McCormick, very solid speed, power, both. Paredes, I think, is solid for power too, even though he doesn't hit the ball that hard. He's amazing. He's like the king right now, pulling fly balls the way he hits them. So I think the offense is good, but not great. And while I don't think he's going to finish top 3 in any of those categories, I think Mark is probably going to be top half of the league in most offensive categories, which gives him a pretty good baseline. Pitching, like you said, is interesting. Everyday Snell's and Sonic a little bit more pessimistic, but he's probably top 20 no matter what you think of him, and maybe higher than that if you like him. Diaz is potentially the best reliever to own, so I love that. Means we've talked about him a little bit already. Risky. So Mark, unlike some of these guys I've said, go buy a power bet. You already know with the money you have left, you don't have a ton left, but I would try to get at least one legitimate difference maker in the rotation, or maybe you're a trade partner for Griffin, or one of the guys like Griffin who has a lot of like SP2s and 3s and 4s. After the first month or 2, depending what ends up happening for you in the auction. I think there's plenty of scenarios where Mark ends up finishing in the back half of the money or in the top half of the league at least. But if he can't get a good starting pitcher or 2, maybe even to complement what he has, I fear he's a bottom half of the league team, and I have him at 10.
Okay.
So Charlie, who is your last team?
Roman.
And what do you sort of think of Roman's team overall? Because if you've been keeping track at home, this is where my fourth team is. So we're gonna have cool conversation on Roman, I think.
Well, Roman's got like a core of Harper, Devers, Tatis. He's got some rookies in Davis, Carter, and some other players, obviously. But he's got most of his roster filled out right now. Definitely Zach Gallen is a top pitcher for sure. Perez is up there, but a number of pitchers are, a little questionable. It's hard to tell where Abbott will be or Wu. Obviously, McClanahan is going to be on the DL. Hunter Brown, I like a lot. Taj Bradley, it's hard to tell what role he'll have this year. Tanner Beebe is a solid pick. So I don't know. You had him at 4.
Yeah, he is my fourth team. That's why I was so curious what your thoughts were. Maybe we're just differing on the players a little bit. To me, I feel like you're right. I mean, he's keeping the most guys of anybody, so his roster is pretty close to filled out. That said, though, he's got $84 to spend on those 5 players he has to fill out, so he can still get a difference maker or two, and then maybe get a $1 player or two at the end of it. We'll see what he ends up doing. I'm not sure what Roman's strategy is for the auction. Roman's, I think, in a pretty good spot. They're just in that, like you said, Gallen. I think even if you're concerned about the innings last year, like Griffin gave us that cool stat last time we talked about all the innings he threw, including the playoffs. At worst, he's like SP 8 or 9, maybe 10. I think he's at SP 1. I think Yuri's an excellent SP2, and then take your pick of 10 or Bobby, like you said, Charlie, Hunter Brown. I think Woo's okay. So I think he has an okay setup there. This brings me back to when we talked about his keeper choices. I guess McClanahan you just really forecast as being super valuable a year from now, because if Roman fancies himself a contender the way I think I must think he is, I probably wouldn't have kept McClanahan and would have gone all in on another guy or two for this year, because I do think he can finish the money and maybe win this year. On offense, Harper, Tatis, Devers, that's 3 top like 15 to 18 bats. I think it's one of those really straight cores there. I love O'Neill Cruz, Evan Carter, CES is like, I don't know, also between 50 and like 100 overall bats, depending where you rank them. And then I think Vinny P is a great post hype guy. We talked about it a lot last year. I know he was hurt, but I think Vinny P is solid. So I don't know. I think Roman's got a situation here where if he, unlike me, where I have to buy a bunch of guys who are cheap to fill out my roster, and I can get a bunch of scrubs. Roman has, I think, better depth than I do already without missing a ton of like the upside, which to me means if he gets a couple of good players in the auction, maybe like a $40 player, a $30 player, and then a couple supporting players after that, I think he has a real chance to win, but definitely compete. And
so did he turn over his whole team from last year?
He turned over a lot of it. He dropped, I guess it would have been 5 players.
No, I mean, like, so last year he finished in last, right?
Yeah, he was. He was the last place team.
And so is the team, drastically revamped in your mind?
I'd say so.
Yeah, I would say trading for Devers at the end of the year. I would say Harper missing the first month and a half and then being back now. Tatis played most of last year, but I think got better as the year went on. And then O'Neill Cruz missed all of last year. Evan Carter didn't play. CES only played a chunk of it. Christian Encarnacion Strand.
Taj Bradley was a pickup, which a lot of people are low on.
Tanner Bybee too,
Taj.
and Yuri.
Yeah.
And he just got Zach Gallen in the offseason. So I think a lot of his team has changed a lot.
Yeah.
At least the guys I'm most excited about. I'm sorry, Kyle. I did not mean to dominate that. You also, I think, have him pretty high, it sounds like.
I have him at 4. Yeah, so cue the Italian opera. I think the Roman Coliseum is back. I like his team a lot. I think he's got the 3rd or 4th best offense straight up. I really like Bryce Harper, Devers, Cruz. O'Neill Cruz, man, like for $21, I think is really exciting. We talk about LA a lot, but I think O'Neill Cruz is actually a pretty similar player. I was kind of surprised to see Zach trade him away, and I think it was a good move. Talking about pitching, like, obviously, I don't have pitchers. I'm not in a great spot. Roman has one of the the most fun pitching setups I've seen, because whatever doesn't work out for Roman, I don't think he really needs to care. He can move on. He can drop players. Um, he's got so much youth and so much upside at the position that I really think he's in a good position for this year and moving forward. So I like Roman's team a lot.
It's funny too because Roman explicitly said, I think I had him 5th last year. I don't know if he was saying just to me or to you. I don't remember you had him last year, Kyle, but Roman said that we gave him the kiss of death by ranking him high. So sorry, Roman, we like you. We'll see what happens here, I guess. Watch Roman finish like in between, like right in the middle, Charlie, of where we have him. He'll probably be like 9th.
Roman, I'm sorry. I hope you don't hate me.
The fun part of this, Charlie, that's why it's cool you're doing power rankings with us. Everybody's gonna hate you a little bit. You're someone's bulletin board material.
It's hard. Like I think we all agree. Like the league is pretty good. Like I don't think there are any crazy ones where you're just thinking, why did this guy keep $50?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, as like now we've finished all of our teams.
Yeah.
Again, like as general takeaways when you were doing the exercise, I do agree. I said this last year, but I feel like it's still the case, and maybe even more so now, where I think even my last 2 or 3 teams, for me, it was Jack and Raymond. I'm not surprised if Jack and Raymond spike and finish in the money, especially Jack. And Raymond, I just don't know what his team's going to look like, so it's a little bit harder to say for sure him. But, and I also am not surprised if like most of my top teams, if they have a couple of injuries, aren't in the top half even. So I feel like it is pretty flat. It's not fun. Like Charlie just said, Roman, don't hate me. Like Jack, don't hate me. Or Raymond, don't hate me.
Well, I think this whole conversation, a lot of discounting is going on with money. If you have a lot of money, it seems to get very discounted.
Yeah, I think we disagree on that generally.
You're right.
I mean, you
like
versus me.
You look at the money that I have to spend at $191, and you think I'm just gonna go out and waste it.
I do. I believe you'll be irresponsible with it, probably.
No, but Charlie, you bring up a great point. I think if every player were at par value, I think I would agree with you way more about all of the rankings. But I think the one problem that I didn't describe very well is just that I don't think the player pool is that healthy.
I agree. I agree with that. It's
Yeah.
going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's all relative.
Right. That's fair.
Who was we have about 5 minutes left, so this is already going to be a decent episode, but final conversation on sort of the power ranks type thing here. Who for each of you was the hardest team to rank? Because I have a couple that I think were sort of tied for the hardest to rank, where I could see the widest range of outcomes. But who was the spot that you had the most difficult time filling?
I have three teams right off the bat. For me, Zach was in the contenders, the tender tier.
Sweet tender Zach.
I moved him around a lot. Like I really toyed with having Zach above Roman, below Brendan. I moved him a lot because Ellie is such a crazy factor. He really is. And we've already talked Ellie ad nauseum, so I'll leave it there, but huge range of outcomes. And then the marks. I named them the mark tier because the marks, I moved around a good bit. I really like both teams. I think Miz and Sparky could both contend.
Charlie, who was hardest for you to rank?
I think Roman's team was the hardest for me to rank. Had a high average for the keepers, even though some superstars, but some of the rest of the players were ranked lower in the standings, and that was why I didn't rank them a lot higher in the hitting category.
Makes sense.
I think that I mean, in some ways, it's why I ranked you number one. It's a little bit about reputation. I think there are different skill levels of the players in the league, and we'll find out who has the skills to use their money wisely, build a team, make trades. I mean, when you look at your budget of $28, I mean, like,
it's so funny.
I mean, I wanted to rank you lower just on that. You know, you need so many players, and but you have a reputation of finishing near the top. So, you know, um,
Charlie,
reputation I think has a
w-
lot to do with it too.
one quick question. So with our keeper structure, do you
Mhm.
think that there's an embedded value in forcing yourself to have $1 players? Because if you get a $10 player who's maybe in the top 200, but middling, they're not a great keeper. But if you have several $1 players who are in the top 200, top 150, all of a sudden for $6, then they become a core. I don't know. Do you think that's compelling or not really?
Well, look, here's the way I looked at it last year. When I wasn't going to contend, I got rid of all my high priced players because I want to find those guys that I can keep for the next 3 or 4 years that can become my higher priced players over time. And Brandon is certainly moving in that direction with six very, 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 very young and very talented players. He might be building a core. So those cheaper players that are being discounted in this whole conversation are really the core of building a long-term team. So um, it all depends on who you get. But like last year for me, I had Judge and Trout, and they were injured a lot of the year, and it killed me. So if you
Yeah.
get one of those guys and they don't play, they get hurt, you're in a lot of trouble. So I tend to like a lot of average players, not average, but
I know
a
what you're
lot of
saying.
solid
Oh no,
players.
yeah, above average contributors who you have your risk spread out more.
I like to spread my risk. Yes,
It makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. I think you protect yourself from a lot of bad outcomes that way. I
that
think for me,
that's
Charlie, you, um, Brendan, and Eric were my three hardest teams. Just because with Brendan, you made a really good point, Charlie, talking about the way you looked at my team. Again, I've already said about Brendan. Brendan is just really good at this. I wanted to rank Brendan lower than 5, and I just couldn't do it, given that I know the way he's played the last 2 seasons. And I feel like it's almost unfair to Eric because Eric I've only played with for the one season. Uh, I think he's got as good or as close to as good a situation as Brendan, and I have him down at 7. So I want to say I'm not holding against him, but I almost am not being fair or intellectually honest to say I have him as a 17. Because to me, if you took all the names away, I think he's got like the 5th or 6th best roster. And then Charlie, specifically with you, sort of you, and then also a little bit to a lesser degree, Dom. A lot of guys with a lot of money, I had a tough time with. Not to say everything Kyle already said about the money. It just sort of comes down to who gets the guys in the auction before all the good players are gone. Because I feel like there's going to be a couple teams with a lot of money left who can't buy good players by the end of it. And by the end of it, I mean like after the first hour when the top like 100 or so are already gone. So I don't know. Like I feel like the people with the most money for me were the hardest to rank, just because I don't know the most about you. And Raymond obviously is including that too. But Raymond, I think we just sort of accept is going to have a tough time of it potentially for the first year. We have like 20 seconds left. Do you guys want to hop on for 5 more minutes and just give final thoughts or whatever?
Hold your horse.
Yeah.
Now we're back, and we were just saying, Charlie, like we have a lot of similar ranks, and it was also just difficult to get this set up. And uh, I think the league is just strong overall. I think there's a lot of good players, good builds.
Yeah, it was super interesting doing it. And we just talked about the guys who are hardest to rank. I guess closing thoughts before we get out of here, because this is going to be a marathon one, and I appreciate you guys taking the time. Who do you think is probably going to have, I guess maybe the money guys are the obvious ones, but the other question I had for you both was, who do you think is most likely to have the biggest change based on how the auction goes? So we've talked about where we think they are going into it, but like based on what they do in the auction, who could you see yourself becoming the most high or the most low on? Is there anybody who really needs to crush it or really not need to crush it? And I guess, like, again, we probably should take Raymond out of that conversation. Just I feel like he's a layup, obvious one.
If you have a lot of money and you're Raymond, you have to crush it. You have to spend that $298 very, very well. So you have to crush it if you're Raymond, right? Me, I look at my average ranking in pitching and hitting, and I have 10 hitters and 6 pitchers, and my average ranking is sort of solid, and I have a ton of money. Now, if I only get one or two players with that ton of money, then it's not going to work out for me. But um, who knows how the draft? But I do agree that the player pool is tight, so there's going to be a lot of inflation. Um, you know, last year I drafted a guy like Bellinger. You know, sometimes
Yeah.
I would rather grab a guy like Bellinger for like $8 instead of $65 for some extremely highly priced player. But the league seems to be moving in a direction of keeping all these high priced players.
Bellinger was a great pick. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, remember we almost did Bellinger and Webb for Jordan Walker, Charlie?
Well, I told you, you could have who did you get for who did you trade away?
You're never gonna believe this, but I trade a lot, so I don't even have the guys anymore. But no, I did Jordan Walker and I forget who else, and I got back. It was Jordan Walker and somebody who's actually pretty useful. It was a 2 for 2, and I got back Joe Ryan and Eloy.
Mhm,
And Eloy, I know I traded for George Springer, who was eh.
mhm.
Eloy's also eh. Joe Ryan was pretty good, but fell apart at the end.
But I
Obviously,
think,
Logan Webb would have been more valuable, and Bellinger both would have been more valuable.
yeah, but I think a lot of it's going to have to do with how people spend their money.
I
I
want
mean,
to
I
double
mean,
click on what you just said, though, too, Charlie. So, are you sort of saying with that? Because with a lot of the money, sorry to interrupt you, but I think advice I gave a lot was you should target, not you specifically, but people with a lot of money should target some of it and just pay, even if it's more than they think they should, for at least one or two good players. You're sort of saying I don't want to like have you out your draft strategy, obviously, and don't say guys you're targeting, but you are probably going to focus more on value, you think, going into this?
I'm gonna focus my money on 3 or 4 core players,
Oh, okay. Yeah. That
and
makes
then
sense then.
and then I'm gonna try and be very smart with my $1 or $2 players. I took a Nick Bucher. I had to spend $2 for a player, but there are players out there that I think I could get, and it won't bother me if I spend $8 on a player that I think can grow into that. I mean, at the end of the day, you if you want to be relevant for a long period of time, you have to do like what Brendan's doing. You have to
You're
grab
right.
those up and coming players. And, at the time I traded away Michael Harris, he was off to a terrible start. I was in the hunt, and I traded him for Trout. And do I think in retrospect it was a mistake at the time? No, I was contending for top dog in the league. And I thought if I had Trout and Judge, um, it would move me up there. But I opted to find a lot of lesser expensive players.
It's a great lesson in process versus results, though. I agree with you, Charlie. And I would have probably, I don't know about the exact same move, but take the player name out of it. You were like third or fourth at that point last. Actually, I think you were second at that point. You were
No,
either second or
I
third.
might have been third.
You were in the top three midway through the season. I remember talking about it. And
Yeah,
then you had Trout and Judge.
yeah,
You got lucky; they both got hurt.
yeah. I mean, that killed me. If they were both healthy for a full year and gave what regular statistics for them, I would have done better.
Yeah, there's
But
no
we'll
guarantee
see.
you win, but you would have done a lot better, I think, than obviously you did. And you're right. I think the process is more important than results there.
Hmm. So we'll see. I mean, I think some of these teams will look. A lot of it is luck. That's why I like. I'd rather have my risks spread out than having $90 in one player.
yep.
I mean, that's the risk that you run. If you lose a couple of your players, Nick, then becomes difficult to win it with a lot of $2 players.
It's sacrilegious to say, but you're absolutely right, man. I don't know if you saw in the last few hours, Ronald Acuna is getting his knee looked at by a doctor.
Oh my God. Well, Charlie, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this.
Uh-huh.
For folks who do snake drafts, there's an alternative rule that has been popularized because of Acuna, where you'll go reverse snake after round one.
Yeah.
And it's because Acuna is such a benefit.
Right. So that's the way it
is that
goes in
something you like,
football.
or
I think a snake draft where you get the first pick and then you get the last pick of the second round is a better way to go than, getting the first pick of every round. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
that's a weird take, Kyle. Yeah.
no, we're we're saying the same thing. I guess where I'm going with this is that so yeah, the
Third
snake,
round reversal you're talking about, where after the
yes,
first 2 rounds it switches.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, the snake always goes
I
in
got you.
reverse order in round 2. But
Yes.
thank you, Nick. Yeah, the stipulation is that in the third round it would reverse.
Mhm.
And so they're trying to create a disadvantage for the first overall pick because Acuna is such an advantage. And I was just curious if you liked that.
I, I've never been in a snake draft in baseball. I've only been in a snake draft in football.
Yeah.
And the bottom line for me is I've been using, one stat service for the last 30 some years in my fantasy baseball league because they have, in my opinion, better rankings, and I use it for football as well.
Yeah.
And in football, I was first, and third the last 3 years.
Nice.
Keep
So
using it then.
There you go.
yeah, exactly. So I'll find those Corey Bellingers in this draft.
Nice.
Well, and in April when you say I'll give you the new Cody Bellinger and the new Logan Webb, SP1 and
That
outfielder
deal's
1.
off the table, Nick.
But I'll do it this year for some guy I pick up randomly. It's a deal.
So Nick, you asked a good question though. For me, it's Eric in terms of like the pressure being on in the draft because his
Yeah.
pitching is great. So if Eric makes some smart moves, picks up a couple value players on offense, and gets some really good bats and power, I think he's going to be one of the best teams for me. What about you?
No, it's a good point. I think again, it's hard. I want to take Raymond out of it because Raymond just is in the most unique situation possible.
Right.
Similarly to what I just said before, Charlie, Eric are probably for me the 2 guys I have too. Just because I know Charlie was higher on Charlie than we are on Charlie, but I was I think a little bit higher than you were in the sense that like if Charlie gets a couple of these studs, I know we don't agree necessarily in the process there, Charlie, but
Yeah.
you, Eric,
Totally.
even Zach, like you said, Kyle, I guess basically just comes down to who has the range of outcomes available. Like, what my team's going to look like basically coming out of the auction. You know what probably Griffin's team's going to look like coming out of the auction. You know what Missigman's team is going to look like coming out of the auction. There's a lot of teams that are pretty much down to the parts almost, where there's a lot of uncertainty there. I guess real quick, because we've, again, gone on forever here, why don't we just reiterate each of our individual power rankings just so it's clippable and easy to be memed in 7 months when inevitably Raymond wins and then someone else who none of us had high finishes second. So Charlie, one more time, just give me your 1 through 14.
All right, so Bucher 1, Griff 2, Brown Bombers 3, Brendan 4, Zach 5, Kyle 6, Jerry 7, Bread Toast 8, Stan 9, Sparky 10, Dom 11, Raymond 12, Miz 13, and Roman 14.
Thank you, sir. And Kyle, what was your 1 through 14?
Genetic Freaks. We have Nick and Griffin. The Tenders. We have myself, Roman, Zach, and Brendan. Then we have the Mark tier. So we have Miz, Sparky. We got 2 marks in there. Eric and Brad are also marks and Bradish at the same time. Then we have the Rebuilders. We have Charlie, Jack, Dom, Ray.
And thank you, Kyle. To end it out, I had 2 big tiers, 1 of 7, 1 of 7. For me, it was Griffin, myself, Kyle, Roman, Brendan, Zach, and Eric. And then Mark, Charlie, Misigman, Brad.
What did you have me at?
I had you at 9. So actually, Charlie, I'm the guy you like right now.
That's the bulletin board.
Yeah, Kyle put you where? 10, 11?
10.
10.
Ooh.
I'm writing this down. In my fantasy baseball football thing, for 3 years now, they've ranked me near the bottom, and I've come in first, and third. So
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah, Kyle eats shit.
Here we go. Hey, Charlie. I mean, it could happen.
I've always
it could
believed.
happen.
So anyway, though, yeah, bottom 7, I had Charlie or Sparky, Charlie, Missigman, Brad, Dom, Jack, Raymond. You guys have anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, it's a lot of fun. It's hard to do, and I think that the part that's the most hardest is nobody knows how to deal with unspent money.
That's right.
Well said. Yeah, no, I agree with you entirely there. It's hard to forecast that.
I
It'll
mean,
be really exciting.
I mean, I could go into this season and I can trade away all my youth and go after, 10 high-priced players, so I could be ranked higher up in the preseason polls next year. But you just have to be wise at spending your money. Granted, there's going to be inflation in the draft for sure, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Well said.
No, couldn't agree with you more. I think with that, we'll get out of here. We'll head into draft week. Get excited, guys.
Yeah,
Less
the
than a week
draft.
away.
Whew. It's gonna be awesome.
All right, see
All
you
right.
later. Thanks a lot.
Well, we'll talk to you guys later on. Thanks for joining. I love you.
I love it too.
Charlie, say it back.